So there are multiple different theories, and I actually have a theory, a meta-theory, if you will. These theories explain different aspects of dreaming at different stages of the sleep cycle, and I think that they all seem to describe something. So the first one is the activation synthesis theory, which suggests that dreams are a result of random neural activity in the brainstem during REM sleep, which the brain then creates a narrative from after the fact, which I was describing earlier, in fact, wasn't I? In that I was saying that sometimes when I dream, I'm really off balance, the world's all topsy-turvy, and I rationalise it as being drunk. So it seems like the experience comes first, and then you try and create a narrative out of it second, which seems to support this theory, really. Although I think that this is a good explanation of why you dream at all, but it seems more true of perhaps non-human animals than it does of human beings, because dreams seem to serve more of a purpose to human beings than they do other beings. Like, I don't think a rat has as complex a dream world as a human being, because they don't have the same hardware, they don't have the same mental capabilities as a human being. They're not going to imagine themselves in abstract scenarios because they don't have the same ability to conjure abstract imagery as a human being, the same creativity that comes from us being conscious. The main cognitive psychological theory proposes that dreams are a way of the brain to process and consolidate information from waking life, which allows us to better remember and learn from our experiences. So it's more a sort of practical filing system, which is, I've ordered these in a sort of levels of abstraction. So the activation synthesis theory is purely physical neuroscientific, and as we go along, they're going to become more and more complicated and more sort of metacognitive, if you will, more and more thinking about thinking and that sort of thing, more tied in with human beings as opposed to non-human animals as well. So I think that that could also apply to non-human animals, but this third one is probably the final one that we could say might apply to non-human animals as well, and that's the problem-solving theory that suggests that we use dreams to work through complex problems, and this is in an environment where there are no consequences for getting it wrong. It's like a way of simulating potential problems in waking life, which seems to hold true, at least to my own experiences, in that I dream about potential threats. They might be somewhat analogous, like I've never encountered a real world zombie, but they seem to occupy my dreams quite a lot. But they represent a threat, don't they? Of either upsetting your survival or just raw physical threat, or the notion that I've seen interpretations of that suggest that, well, it's that you want to get away from crowded places, which is actually true. I don't like living in a city, but have to put up with it. So yes, it's trying to solve problems, supposedly, without actually dealing with real-world consequences. We do know that your brain does revisit past experiences and emotions, and it does also help resolve those emotional conflicts. So it seems like there's some element to this, because people who have experienced traumatic experiences have more vivid and emotionally charged dreams. And if they've got these experiences and they're experiencing them in their dreams, well, doesn't that suggest that there is some sort of reconciliation going on here? The fact that there is a difference at all, because it doesn't necessarily follow that they take that traumatic experience to their unconscious mind and to their dreams, but seems to be a part of it. And the one that I'm sure everyone's familiar with is the Freudian interpretation that dreams are a way of accessing the unconscious mind and reveal repressed desires and conflicts. And I think that the focus on repressed desires and conflicts, I think, is a little bit of its time, because there are things
It
that
says more about Freud than humans in general.
Well, he came up with the Oedipus complex that, everyone secretly fancies the opposite sex parent, but
the
then
Oedipus and Electra, is
that's
that the one?
right, yeah. But then that's complicated by the fact of what happens when they're homosexual. What happens if they don't? What happens if they don't know their parents? What do they just develop an unusual? Apparently it was used as like a model for your sexuality, but then if you don't know your parents, you can still be normal.
Right, yeah.
And it's not like orphans are doomed to be sexual deviants. I mean, I'm sure there might be.
To me, that simply reveals that Freud fancied his mum.
Yes, I think so.
That's all that
Or at least believed that he did, based on his dreams. But yeah, I think that certainly a means of accessing your unconscious mind. You get an insight into what's going on there, because that's what we've been talking about for all of this time, is what you're learning from your unconscious mind. That's pretty undeniable. And
right.
But repressed desires and maybe conflicts. I mean, a conflict would make sense with the other views that you bring emotionally conflicting ideas to your dreams to resolve. That seems to make sense with those. But I don't think that too many people repress very much anymore, do they? I mean, I don't know, maybe I just don't have any repressed desires to repress in the first place, and therefore I don't think that it's a valid thing. So I suppose that would have to be something that people have secret desires, but then again, they're not going to talk about it. So how do you validate that?
Yeah. I've never had dreams where I'm like, yes, I got to do that thing in a dream that I really want to do in real life, but can't or won't.
I want to go to space, but I've never dreamt of being launched up into space.
Right, yeah.
And after all of the films I've watched, I've watched Interstellar 2001, I've not had a single dream. Even watching them before bed. I fell asleep 3 times watching 2001: A Space Odyssey. But yeah, it's one of those things where I think it's got to be taken with a pinch of salt. And I think that all of psychoanalytic theory is sort of a proto-psychology. There's the distinction between the conscious mind and the unconscious is a really good contribution, but it shouldn't be seen as the be-all and end-all. And finally, I wanted to talk about the neuroscience, because I don't think there's much to reconcile the theories of why we dream, because we can't really know for certain, and I'm not sure we ever will, but the research simply isn't there to pick one of the theories. But I think that each of those theories seems to apply in some way to one of the stages of sleep, and I think they all have a useful perspective there. And I'm not normally someone to say that, everything applies. Normally I have a favourite theory to explain a phenomenon, but here I think that I can see each one of them applying fairly evenly in their own domain. But anyway, on to the neuroscience. Obviously, because we don't understand the nature of dreams perfectly, we don't have a full understanding of the neural areas involved. But
We don't?
As in, not entirely, no.
Oh, right.
But there are areas that we know are implicated. For example, the brainstem contains a network of neurons called the reticular activating system, or the RAS, that plays a role in maintaining wakefulness and alertness during the day, and then promoting sleep at night. So obviously the brainstem is one of the most primitive parts of the brain. So the fact that it's involved in sleep suggests that the activation of sleepfulness and wakefulness, if you want to put it like that, is very, very fundamental to our experience. Because generally speaking, the more primitive parts of the brain are more in the middle, and the outer parts are later developing. So our prefrontal cortex, which is implicated in things like executive control, meaning controlling over other mental processes, which is a key aspect of being conscious, as well as our personalities and things like that. It's all up here in this outer part in our forehead. So the further you go, the closer to things like the amygdala, which are like fight or flight response, that sort of thing. That's pretty close to the brainstem. Right. So the brainstem sends signals to other parts of the brain to relax the muscles and suppress motor activity, which helps us from acting out in our dreams and prevents us from hurting ourselves. So it's implicated in that part of it. And it also helps trigger rapid eye movement, which is, of course, REM sleep, as well as changes in heart rate, breathing, and other more autonomic functions. So the actual physical aspects seem to be related to the brainstem, but these parts aren't necessarily the interesting aspects of it, are they? They're not the actual meat and potatoes of the dreams. It's more how you get into the state of sleep to begin with.
Or maybe super quick to ask at this point, that thing of sleep paralysis, where you wake up and you can't move. I've never had that in my life, but
I've had that quite badly.
Really? I've never had it ever.
I was basically paralysed in my dream, but I was dreaming that I was in my bed awake, but I was sort of semi-conscious because I could see at the end of my bed was my door, and I had a black dressing gown hanging on the door, and I, in my sleep paralysis state, thought that it was a hooded figure stood at the end of my bed, looming over me to like ritualistically sacrifice me.
It's terrifying.
So yeah, I was just
You were
paralysed, yeah, like semi-awake, at least able to see something, but not fully understand what I'm seeing. In that I was attributing agency to a dressing gown, so I couldn't have been wide awake, obviously.
Right. Okay.
But there's some sort of weird in between where I was paralysed and sort of hallucinating that my dressing gown was coming to kill me.
God. I heard a lot of people talk about how they wake up and they're paralysed for a little bit. I've never.
I was probably
that.
paralysed for about a couple of minutes.
Sounds like ages.
It's horrible, yeah. Don't get me wrong. I was really worried. I was just like, oh no, have I had some sort of like stroke in my sleep or something and I can't move?
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.